our university out to our communities. And our mission is to provide resources for individuals and families to sustain and improve quality of life. And this is our wonderful webinar team. We've got Dr. Wendy Dahl, Wendy Lynch, Julie England, and Jamila Lepore, who will be our speaker today. So some general housekeeping guidelines for how to use a webinar if you've never attended before. About midway down, you'll see on the right-hand side or on your chat box side, you're going to see there's a list for materials. There's 2 materials that you can download. Please do so. One's a copy of the actual presentation, and one is a marketing flyer basically for the upcoming webinars to please share with others. Down in the bottom corner, right-hand corner, is going to be where your chat box is, and if you have a private message you'd like to send, you can actually use the drop-down menu to select a particular person, or you can submit your question or comment right there to the entire audience as well. If you notice your box disappears, look for the orange tab with the white arrow, click it, and it will pop that control panel back out. And thank you to Hillsborough County for providing us webinar access today. And at the close of today's presentation, we're going to send out a short survey that'll be emailed to you. If you've participated in the past, you know that they are a very short survey, and we really appreciate all of your time and feedback that you spend with these. It is very important for our future webinars and what we present. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Jamila Lepore with today's webinar, Happy Healthy Days.
Thank you, Wendy. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And are you recording?
Yes, I am. Okay.
Checking. Yes, we can hear you just fine.
All right, great. So let's get started. Today's presentation is called Happy Healthy Days, 21 Strategies to Keep the Weight Off in the Holiday Season. So good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you today about eating healthy and staying healthy throughout the holidays. And, you know, this is the time of year when we're attending more events and eating decadent foods. And at the same time, we're really busy with the hustle and bustle of the season. So we end up exercising less and stressing out more. And for many of us, that results in weight gain. And then we go into New Year's and make resolutions to lose the weight that we gained, only to be unsuccessful and repeat it over and over again the next year. In this presentation, I'm going to give you 21 strategies to prevent that weight gain in the first place. And then next month, be sure you join us for our nutrition webinar on diets to ditch and resolutions to keep that Wendy Dahl will be presenting, so that you're prepared not only in the holiday season, but also throughout the rest of the year. So I wanted to open it up with a question first, and feel free to just reply into the chat box. Do you typically gain weight during the holidays, and about how much weight do you gain? I'll just give a couple minutes to see what you guys say. Okay, we've got a few pounds, 10 to 15, 5 to 10, yep, 10 pounds. Yeah, that's pretty much what a lot of people say, is about 5 to 10 pounds. So if you're doing that consistently, you know, year in, year out, then that's definitely an issue. So one thing that I want us to consider as we enter this holiday season is looking at weight loss versus weight maintenance. And I saw somebody said that they've been trying to maintain, which is really good. For most people, it's not a time to try to start losing weight. You know, between all of the festivities and the gatherings, the traditions, and even just being busy this time of year, we're probably better off maintaining our current weight rather than trying to lose. And it's just more realistic, and you'll set yourself up for success. So what's ahead? I have divided the 21 strategies into 3 different categories, foods, habits, and mindset. And each of these is important to keeping healthy this time of year. It's not just about our diet or just about exercise. It's really about everything that we do in our life. And so first we're going to dive into food fixes. And these are the strategies related to food itself. So we'll cover everything from portion control to food choices to how you can make your favorite recipes just a little bit lighter. Then we're going to talk about all things habits, and habits are directly related to our behavior and environment. And by hacking into these things, you'll be able to set yourself up for success and make healthy the easier choice. Then finally, we're tying it all together with mindset. The holidays can be stressful, and that can influence how we take care of ourselves. So you'll learn how to manage those thoughts and emotions so that they don't get the best of you. All right, so let's get into it. Food fixes. It's all about the food this time of year, isn't it? And I want to ask another question. What are your favorite foods this time of year? Type it in the chat box. We'd love to see what those are. I have several that I'll probably be sharing with you guys as examples throughout some of the slides too. Pumpkin pie, dessert, stuffing. You guys are going to make me hungry. It is lunchtime. Cookies, wine. Yep. Lots of pumpkin pie. Well, it is that time of year right now, for sure. Hot chocolate. Yep, I'm seeing a lot of sweet things. That seems to be a trend here. Okay. So let's get into the first strategy then, because we want to make this isn't about depriving yourself. So I'm not asking you to, not enjoy all those foods that you mentioned. We're just going to show you some strategies on how to do it the healthier way. So the very first thing that you can do to enjoy those foods that you love is by controlling your portions. And there's a few ways that you can do that. One of the first things you can do is really just use smaller dishware. So smaller plates, smaller bowls, smaller cups. This helps build in portion control, but it's also kind of a sort of Jedi mind trick, and I'll show you what I mean by that in the next few slides. The next way to control portions is really to stick to one serving of a food. And this seems simple enough, but how easy is it to stack your plate to the ceiling at Thanksgiving, even after you've indulged in a ton of appetizers and you're also expecting to have dessert? And then finally is that we can actually estimate our portions. And there's a couple ways we can do this as well, and I'll share those with you in a few slides. I'm not expecting you to weigh and measure all of your foods. That's just not realistic, and it isn't necessary either. So with the first part of this is looking at the size of your dishes. So here's an example of how your dishware can make a huge difference. This is a single serving of pasta on a very large plate. And I don't know about you, but that serving looks pretty measly to me. So I don't think that I would be full from that serving. But if we take that same serving and we put it into a smaller bowl, it looks a lot more satisfying. It also helps that we added some bright colored veggies, but the thing is that we eat with our eyes first, and so simply by changing the size of our dishes, an appropriate or smaller serving size can actually look much bigger. Okay. So the next thing is to talk about how to estimate portions, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, but I'm just going to share with you 2 of my favorites. And the first one is MyPlate, which is the plate that you're seeing here. And if you go to choosemyplate.gov, you can find a ton of resources on MyPlate. If you've never heard of it, it actually replaced MyPyramid. So instead of the food groups being shown as a pyramid, it's actually showing you a plate, because really we eat off of a plate. We don't eat from a pyramid. So you've got the different food groups, and they're represented basically proportionally as far as how you should fill up your plate. So you can see that half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables, and on that, the vegetables you want to be a little bit bigger of a serving size than fruits. And then on the other half, you want it to be half protein and half grains. And your grain serving is a little bit bigger than the protein. And then having dairy three times a day. So this is basically assuming you're having 3 meals 3 times a day, and that's it. And I just want to point out too that this is a guideline. This isn't necessarily like you have to have exactly these servings at each meal. But to give you an idea of what that would look like, let's say we take a Thanksgiving meal. So we could put turkey in the protein section to make up about 1/4 of the plate. Your grains could be a biscuit or some sort of stuffing. You could put cranberry sauce or a fruit salad, or I know some people do like roasted apples. That could be your fruit for Thanksgiving. And then for veggies, you could either have it all as one vegetable, like a green bean casserole or roasted vegetables, or you could divide it up even further and do sort of half and half. So maybe half of the vegetables would be green bean casserole and the other half would be mashed potatoes, for instance. For the dairy group, you could get those servings in at other meals or use that as a time to have maybe a small slice of pie. A lot of times, like pumpkin pie, for instance, is usually made with evaporated milk. And while technically that's not really a dairy serving, again, this is a guideline, so it's something that you could do just for that holiday. I wouldn't expect you to do that on an average day to count pie as a dairy serving. But yeah, just something to think about. Okay, and the next way to estimate portions, there it goes, this is actually probably my favorite way, is to use your hand, because, well, you always have your hands with you, and everyone's hand is proportionate to their own body and thus their own nutrition needs. So for instance, a small woman is going to have smaller hands than, say, a very tall man, and that makes sense because a small woman's going to need a lot fewer calories and nutrition than a large man would. And if you download our materials that Wendy and Julie both mentioned at the beginning, the PDF of this PowerPoint is there, so you will have this guide available to you if you want to look back on it. So, excuse me, let's get a sip of water. Okay, so your palm is about the size that you want for protein, like lean meat and fish. And the front of your fist is about 1/2 cup, so that's something you would use for things like grains or starches. Full fist, not really happy that they used ice cream in this example because that really should be 1/2 cup, but your full fist would be what you would use to measure like fruits and vegetables, for instance. And then the tip of your thumb is about a tablespoon, which is a serving of something like peanut butter. And the tip of your finger is about a teaspoon, which is a good estimate for any fats that you're adding, like oil or butter. Okay, so the first one was controlling your portions, and secondly, another strategy you can use is to stick to favorites. So don't just eat all of the holiday foods simply because they're there. You want to stick to the foods that you absolutely love and fill in the rest with more nutritious options. You'll not only enjoy it more, but you'll also save your waistline, which is why we're presenting this in the first place. So for instance, I like traditional pumpkin pie and I like apple pie, but I absolutely love my mom's crunchy pumpkin pie, which is kind of a hybrid. It's a regular pumpkin pie, but she uses a graham cracker crust instead of a regular crust, and then the topping is like brown sugar and butter and oatmeal, and just thinking about it, I'm getting excited for Thanksgiving. But so anyway, I save room for a slice of that, and I just basically skip the regular pumpkin pie and the apple pie, because even though I like them, they're not my absolute favorites, and I would rather spend my calories on something that I absolutely love. So with the holidays, we're going to be attending lots of parties and events, and there's bound to be appetizers at many, if not all, of these festivities. And you won't always have control over what is served, but you can make better selections. If there's a fruit or vegetable tray, you can load up on that. Something like shrimp cocktails, low in calories, and you can also look for healthier sauces and dips like salsa, or if there's a dip made with light sour cream or light mayo, or even Greek yogurt is a popular thing a lot of people are doing now. What you want to do is limit those high-calorie, high-saturated fat items like cured meats and cheeses, heavy cream or cheese dips, and really anything that's fried. The bottom line with this strategy is that you want to go easy on the appetizers so you can enjoy the main event and possibly even dessert. So another thing that you're going to find at most parties is booze. And gram for gram, alcohol has more calories than carbohydrates or protein, and it doesn't provide a lot of quality nutritional value. But you can still enjoy those adult beverages by making smart choices with your beverages. And the first thing to consider is water. You want to drink water as much as possible, especially between cocktails. Water will help you stay hydrated and prevent you from overdoing it on the alcohol. You'll also want to limit those high-calorie seasonal beverages, things like eggnog or apple cider, especially when they're spiked. Those are typically packed with sugar and calories. So if you are going to enjoy those, you want to have just a small glass and really enjoy it, and then move on to lighter choices. So a lighter choice might be something like a dry champagne. This is a great option because it's typically lower in calories than other wines. It's for a 4-ounce serving, which depending on the champagne flute that you're using, is less than 100 calories. And I don't know about you, but that's pretty good for a cocktail. And another thing to keep in mind is when you are feeling hungry is to try having a large glass of water first. A lot of times we mistaken hunger for thirst. So we feel like we're hungry, but actually we're thirsty. And if we just drink some water, then we're usually okay. I like Julie's idea. Try a mimosa and get some vitamin C too, and your fruit serving. Very good point, Julie. All right, next strategy. So strategy number 5, you want to make sure there's at least one healthy option at a party that you're attending. If you're the host, you can make one yourself. And if you're a guest, you can ask to bring something. A lot of times hosts are willing to let you bring something because if you have a lot of people, it's one less food item you have to pay for and prepare. So this time of year, it's one really easy and foolproof, healthy, delicious side dish is roasted veggies. So you could pick your favorites like carrots and parsnips, beets, sweet potato, really any root vegetable that you like, and then just roast it with a little bit of olive oil, salt, and Parmesan cheese. Honestly, this is kind of my favorite way to prepare any vegetable. I think if there's a vegetable you don't like, try it roasted and see if that changes your mind. It's just one of the best ways, I think, to prepare vegetables. The other thing you can do is to search for healthy holiday recipes online. There's tons of websites out there now that have lightened up holiday favorites. So you do have to do some digging, but it depends on what you want to have and how much effort you're willing to put in. Let's see, would sparkling apple cider be a fruit portion? No, I would probably not consider that a fruit portion. Technically, there's some juice in that, but yeah, that doesn't really count, especially if it's spiked. Okay, strategy number 6. So I know we already talked about sticking to favorites, but here's another strategy when it comes to specifically treats. You don't have to give up sweets completely, as I mentioned in the beginning. It is the holidays, and for most of us, that would just be absolutely crazy. We just had Halloween yesterday, so I imagine a lot of you guys have some leftover candy. And one thing that you can do is freeze it. You can also do that with holiday cookies. Actually, my mother-in-law makes her cookies way ahead of time and freezes them all, and they're just as good. Your freezer's kind of your best friend this time of year. So what you can do is put them into baggies or containers into single portions so that they're ready to go when you want them. And by freezing and portioning it, you're making it less convenient to just grab a handful. You have to wait for it to thaw, and hopefully you won't be as tempted to eat a ton of it in one sitting. The other thing is that, it's kind of the out of sight, out of mind principle. If it's in the freezer instead of on the counter staring at you every time you enter the room, you'll probably be less likely to indulge. And when it comes to things like cake and pie, because those are also, especially pie is very popular this time of year, what you can do is take a normal slice of pie. So pie is usually cut into 8 servings. And then if you just cut that slice into half, or you can, if you're the one making them, you can make them into mini pies or cupcakes or something, kind of like this picture is showing with these little mini pumpkin pies. And by doing that, you're cutting your calories basically in half, but you're still able to indulge in a dessert. And the last food fix strategy is to modify your recipes. And so how can we do that? Because that seems simple enough, but there's a couple things, especially with holiday recipes, that we can do to make them a little bit healthier. So when it comes to holiday recipes, they're typically loaded with fat and sugar. And just a few simple swaps can make your recipes more nutritious without really sacrificing taste. Because at the end of the day, they are holiday recipes and we don't want to, completely ruin them by just taking out all of the flavor, all of the fat, and all of the sugar. It's not necessary, excuse me. So with fat, you can use low-fat or fat-free dairy, like in dips or baked goods. I mentioned with pumpkin pies, usually made with evaporated milk, and you can just use fat-free evaporated milk. You won't even notice the difference, I promise. I've done that before. You can lightly mist oil. Instead of dousing your pans in butter, you can just use one of those sprayers. You can also choose leaner meat choices. So for instance, at Thanksgiving, picking the white meat or the breast meat on the turkey instead of the dark meat. For sugar, you can sweeten recipes using fruit like bananas or applesauce, or even dates are very popular right now to use as a sweetener. And I suggest looking for recipes that do this already, because baking truly is a science. And if you don't have a recipe that's formulated to use fruit and you try to put fruit in place of sugar, you might end up with something that turns out really weird and have to throw it all away. And the same is true actually if you decide to use low-calorie or calorie-free sweeteners in your recipes, things like erythritol or stevia or sucralose, for instance, because those don't have the same properties. Fruit and sweeteners, calorie-free sweeteners, do not have the same properties as sugar does, and sugar is not used in, particularly in baked goods, just to sweeten. And if you saw our sweetener webinar, we talked about that a little bit. They're also used for, it's also used for bulk and for browning and for lots of other functional purposes in the recipe. So even if you see, like at the supermarket, they have those baking blends, things where it's basically a sweetener plus some sort of starch. Typically it's maltodextrin, and they say that you can use it cup for cup as, you can replace cup for cup sugar in recipes. And while that's true for something like a sweet tea, that's not true when it comes to baked goods, because it simply just doesn't have the weight that sugar does. So like I said, for those, definitely look into recipes that are tailored towards using either fruit or sweeteners, whichever you prefer. One thing that you can do to your existing recipes, though, without sacrificing it, for most recipes, this is not always true, but I would say a majority of the time this is a good rule of thumb, is to cut the sugar by 1/3. So if your recipe calls for 1 cup of sugar, you can usually cut back to 2/3, and the recipe will still come out okay and still be sweet and still have the same functional properties that it did before. And the last thing on recipe modification is to get smart with healthy cooking techniques. So you want to try healthier methods like roasting or baking, grilling instead of frying. You can bump up the volume of your grains and your heavy carbohydrate dishes with vegetables. For instance, when making mashed potatoes, you can do half potatoes and half cauliflower. If you've ever had a cauliflower mash, you don't have to do all cauliflower, though you could if you wanted. If you have a stuffing recipe, you could use half of the amount of bread and make the other half diced eggplant. So you can really get creative and try to think of what high carbohydrate options, because that's usually the holiday recipes are usually higher in carbohydrate. What can you sort of replace with vegetables? So that way you can still enjoy the dish and get a large serving size without having as many calories and carbohydrates. The last thing is really you don't want to forget to use herbs and spices to add flavor, especially this time of year. I mean, if we think about all of the holiday dishes, a lot of times it's the herbs and the spices that really make us remember or that bring us back to some sort of memory. So think of like pumpkin pie spice, for instance, or at Thanksgiving we've got things like sage is a really common herb that we see around this time of year, but maybe not other times of the year as often. All right, so now let's get into strategies to hack our habits and looking at those ways of how we can set up our environment and change our behaviors for the better. But first, a question. So what unhealthy habits do you have in the holiday season? For instance, habits that don't help you towards your goal could be that you don't exercise as much, or you eat something every time you pass a tray or table with holiday foods, or you just can't say no to seconds even after you're full. Not exercising, tasting while I cook. I've got one for you, Robin, and a few slides. Eating too much, not being active. All of the above. Yeah, lots of things with exercise. We're going to get into some of those. Okay. The broken bacon. Oh, yes, that's an easy one to do. Sometimes we accidentally break them, right, Wendy? Stress eating. Yeah, so lots of good things. Well, lots of things you guys are saying here that are very common issues, and hopefully we'll cover some of those and help you attack those issues with some strategies. So one of the best, but perhaps not easiest things that you can do is to keep a food log. And this may seem obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've had people just absolutely shocked at how much they were actually eating once they wrote it down or recorded it into an app. We forget about the things that we add to our coffee or the candy jar we pick up from every time we walk by the office, or as somebody mentioned, you know, those little bites that we're taking while we're cooking, but those things add up. So it's really important to keep track of them. And you could keep a log in a journal by writing it down and tracking your calories and even your macronutrients, so fats and carbs and protein, really depending on how much detail you want. I think calories at the end of the day would probably be the most important if you were writing it down. Or you could use an app, something like MyFitnessPal, where you can search for the foods that you're eating or even scan a barcode if it comes in a package. They've made it a lot easier nowadays to be able to track things. And I tend to like apps because you're always pretty much bringing your phone with you, so you don't have to remember to bring a journal, and you can do it in the moment. You know, like when you're in the Starbucks line, you can put in your drink right there. I think that it's easier as long as you're tech friendly, but you guys are on this webinar, so you should be able to use an app. So if you do want to do this, it's a good idea also to add accountability to it so that you can actually keep track. Finding a friend or a family member that you can check in with, or even a health professional like your doctor or a dietitian or a personal trainer can really help you stick to continuing to track. And I do want to point out too that this isn't something that you really need to do long term, unless of course you enjoy it, and some people do enjoy tracking their food. But even tracking it for just 1 or 2 weeks can be very eye-opening and really help you see where you're at and where you can improve. So a few of you guys mentioned exercise. So another thing you can do this time of year is actually to increase your exercise from even more than what you were doing previously, because really you want to make up for all those inevitable extra calories you're going to be consuming. because there will be food and there will be traditions, and you shouldn't have to miss out. You just need to move more. And there's a couple ways you can do this. So you can plan a routine. So you're getting up every morning to do exercise, or you take half of your lunch to go on a walk, or you know that after dinner every day you're going to walk your dog and go out with your spouse and walk around. You can build it into your routine. And you can also sneak it in. So things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or parking your car further from an entrance. Those are all things of, just finding how can I add more steps to my day. And finally is to actually plan it into your festivities. So for instance, during your holiday shopping, you can take the long way to get to a store. Some families have football games or play tag on Thanksgiving, or even something as simple as a tradition that we have in my family is actually the morning of Thanksgiving. And I go on a walk with my mom and my younger sister, and it's something that we always look forward to because we're able to, it's really a win-win. We get family bonding time and we get extra activity. All right, temptations. They are inevitable this time of year, aren't they? Don't these look so pretty? It kind of makes me want chocolate right now. Probably making a few of you guys hungry at this point too with all these food slides. Hopefully you have already had lunch or you're eating lunch right now. So anyway, even with temptations, there are a couple of things you can do to minimize those urges. For one, you can distract yourself and see if the craving passes. You can go for a walk or find an errand to run, play with your kids, anything. Usually if we're busy and we're go, 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 we're not really thinking about food. So that can be a good strategy. Another thing you can do is drink a full glass of water and simply wait 20 minutes. As we mentioned earlier, we often mistaken thirst for hunger, and sometimes we really just need to give ourselves something to drink, and the urge will pass. And then the last thing is that sometimes you really just need to give in to the temptation, but you want to keep your portion appropriate. A little bite or a single serving, just enough to give you a taste. And on that note, I do want to mention that every bite does count. So this isn't a strategy that you want to use all of the time. Giving into just a bite several times throughout the day will add up. So don't abuse that strategy. I saw somebody earlier saying that they did taste testing while they were cooking. And that's basically one of the things that we're talking about here. So it's important to watch what you eat between meals. And like I said, especially if you're the one cooking. If you take a bite here and take your bite there, and you still have a meal with appetizers and you don't compensate, you will take in extra calories. And this is perhaps one of the most difficult things for people to do because it's so easy to think, oh, it's just one bite. But over the course of days and weeks, that definitely translates into extra pounds. And I think that that's why this is a big reason why this is such an issue this time of year, because there is a lot more cooking, there is a lot more sampling that's involved, and so we do take more little extra bites and don't think about it. Okay, so this is another one too, and my husband's a dentist, so he'll be happy that I put this up here. But one way to help you, one way to help that urge to take the bites here and there is to keep your breath fresh. Anyone who's ever eaten something immediately after brushing their teeth knows why this strategy works. It's just absolutely disgusting. Mint and cheese should never be paired together. Mint and orange juice should never be paired together. And you get the point. Mint is just one of those things that once you have that, clean, fresh feeling, the last thing you want to do is eat something and it completely ruins the taste in your mouth. And even the food that you're eating, it just doesn't taste good. So what you can do is, brush your teeth or use mouthwash after a meal so that you are prevented from going back for seconds or thirds. I know this time of year that's really easy to do, so just something to keep in mind. And then also keeping gum and mints around for that in-between meal snacking. So instead of going for that bite of something that you want, try to pop in some mint or gum and see if the craving passes. Okay, leftovers. Now, this can be a dagger into our efforts to stay healthy. And if you're the host, I suggest only making what you need. Some hosts, and my mother is included in this, go way overboard and make enough to feed 100 people when there's only 10 invited. So if you throw in an event before, you know where you can cut back. You'll save, not only your waistline, but also you'll save on grocery bills, and save on food waste is really a big thing too. There's a lot of people who are not going to have food this holiday season, so trying to limit how much we're actually buying. If you're a guest, you only want to take what you actually need, and of the options you pick, try to pick some of the healthier ones if they are available. If not, then what you can do is basically back to our first strategy and simply minimize your portions. So take the foods you want, but keep your portions appropriate. And finally, what you can do is repurpose staple items into healthy dishes. So what do I mean by that? For instance, at Thanksgiving, turkey is, a great protein, and especially if you're using some of the white meat, you can take it and make it into a turkey sandwich on whole grain bread and add some veggies, or you can make it into a turkey chili, which is usually a little bit lighter. And so you can take those good items and turn them into healthy recipes later. You could also use like cranberry sauce, for instance, and stir that into plain Greek yogurt. So instead of buying the fruit sweetened yogurt, you can just add a little bit of the cranberries and make sort of a healthy parfait. Okay, so for many of us, the holidays mean travel. And as I saw before, lots of you guys were mentioning exercise as an issue. Travel gets us out of our routine, and it's often an excuse to forget about exercise. So getting an activity during your travels, it can seem like it's difficult, but it doesn't need to be. So one thing you can do to encourage exercise while you're traveling is to make sure that you pack your gym clothes and your shoes. If you only have dress shoes to walk in, you're less likely to do it because that can be uncomfortable after some time. You can also pack lightweight equipment like resistance bands or a few light dumbbells, and just do a quick search to find some exercises that you could take with you. You could also download an app that uses body weight exercises. There's a ton of these available regardless of what phone you have for a quick workout, either in your hotel room or wherever you're staying. You really don't need much to be able to exercise. And another thing, I didn't put it up here, but you really can also just get out and explore the place you're traveling to, especially if it's somewhere you've never been or somewhere you don't go to often. Walking is by far my favorite way to get activity in when I travel, because you get so caught up in viewing the sights that you really forget that you're getting in steps. I went to Italy last year, and I think there was one day we got like 30,000 steps in, and I didn't even realize it because there was just so many really cool things that we were seeing that day, and that is not typical of me, so don't. I was very surprised that's how many we got, but you definitely, when you're traveling and sightseeing, you kind of forget how much you're actually walking. All right, so finally, we are going to get into some of the strategies to get your mindset right. And, one of the biggest things we neglect at this time of year is our emotional well-being. We all know the holidays can be a joyous time, but they can also be very stressful, particularly if a loved one is sick or finances are tight, or you simply have family members that are just difficult to deal with. And I'm sure all of us can relate to that in some capacity. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you experience more stress this time of year? And does that influence how you eat and exercise? All right, so we have a couple of yeses, a no. Sometimes. And you know what, even for the people that said no, I think sometimes it also depends on the year. Some years are definitely more stressful than others. So we can experience stress any time of year, but it seems like the holidays sometimes just add a little bit more because there's family obligations and all sorts of expectations around this time. So let's look at some of the things to help limit the stress that we have. One thing that we can do to get our mind right is to prioritize enjoyment. So not just focusing on the food this time of year, which is really easy to do. We focus on the people you're with and the traditions and even the decorations. For instance, oh, sorry, got off track. So let's just, like when you're at a party, you want to survey all your food options before making a choice. And this goes back to our strategy of sticking with favorites. If you go through the line without seeing what's there first, you're likely to stack your plate with a ton of things that looked okay but aren't necessarily things that you love. And this is basically because, like I was saying, we want to really prioritize the people that we're with and what's going on. And because if we don't do that, then we're going to be more likely to just put a lot more food on our plate and maybe overeat because we're stressed out or someone is irritating us. And then another thing, and this is really, it should go without saying, but do not stand by the food table. Anyone who's done this knows exactly why. This is probably the worst thing that you could do to yourself. Instead, you want to walk around and converse with your friends and your family and focus on the joyous things that are not food related. All right, number 16, so eat regularly. This is a strategy where a lot of people tend to do the exact opposite. They know a party is that evening, so they starve themselves all day so they can save their calories for the event. The problem is you end up overdoing it and eating way more than you would have had you just had consistent healthy meals throughout the day. You can choose to eat lighter meals, but you want to avoid skipping them altogether. You also don't want to show up to a party completely famished. It's important to have a healthy snack or even a light meal before you go to avoid overeating. Plus, that way you'll know that you've had something nutritious, especially if they don't have something that you can eat when you get to the party. And then finally, you really want to skip the I've blown it mentality. And this is the whole, well, I've already eaten a ton of junk today, so I may as well just keep doing it. You know, how many of us have been there before? It just doesn't work that way, so don't fool yourself. If you do indulge, enjoy it, but don't let it affect the way that you eat the rest of the day or season for that matter. All right, strategy 17, savor the bite. So you're eating all of these decadent holiday meals, and it's important to really slow down and really savor it. This helps you not only enjoy your food more, but also allows your stomach to catch up to your eyeballs. Your food is time to digest, and you can avoid that, stuffed, uncomfortable feeling. And some ways to slow down is simply to chew more slowly. You can also put your fork or spoon down between each bite to slow you down, and drinking sips of water between bites can help as well. Those are ways that can really help you stop and savor the food. So if you are on a weight loss journey or you're attempting to make healthier choices, it's easy to cast shame when you do indulge. And this may not apply to all of you, but it's still something worth considering because oftentimes people indulge and then they have a ton of shame and a ton of guilt as far as the choices that they've made. And this goes back to what I mentioned before with skipping the I've blown it mentality. Remember that each meal is a new choice. If you overdid it at one meal, let it go. You can make a better choice at the next one. And remember just that you're human. Sometimes we all indulge a little too much. Even as a dietitian and a personal trainer, I'm no exception to this rule. I have the occasional meal when I overdo it. But instead of agonizing over it, I, let it go, move on, and just make a healthy choice at the next meal. And then if you're still feeling upset about your choices, even if you're, trying to move on, trying to let it go, enlist support from family and friends, or even a health professional. These people can help you work through whatever it is that you're struggling with. The food pushers. I'm sure a lot of you guys know what this is like. And this is a very tough one for a lot of people, particularly because it's so common in so many cultures. My husband's family, for instance, is Italian, and every meal we have together, his lovely grandma, who I absolutely adore, is constantly trying to make him eat more. And of course she's doing it out of love, but that doesn't mean that it's right. And I know this, of course, is way easier said than done, but it is important that you be assertive. If you have goals to be healthy and you have, especially if you have medical conditions where you really do need to watch what you eat, let your family and friends know that. And if they truly support you, they will understand. And if that doesn't work, I have a couple other things. So if that doesn't work, you can also try saying, I appreciate the hospitality, but no thank you, I'm full. This usually works for me, but if it doesn't, because it won't all the time, some people will consistently keep pushing, then tell them it looks good and that you'd like to take it home rather than eating it right there in the moment. Then what you can do is either toss it later, which, I hate to say that because we really don't want to waste food, but if it is important to your health, you can do that, or you can portion appropriately like we mentioned earlier. The other thing is you have to remember too, I've found that sometimes the host wants to give you the foods because they don't want it in their house for temptation. So you shouldn't feel guilty about taking it and just getting rid of it because that's probably what they would do anyway. So graciously accept it and then deal with it later. And this is one of my favorites because it goes again back to the I've blown it mentality. When it comes to food, simply enjoy the day, not the season, because the season is several months long. And the actual holidays themselves are typically a day or a few days, depending on what holiday you're celebrating. So if you're just enjoying the holiday itself when it comes to the food and you're making nutritious choices the rest of the season, you're going to be much better off. I like just indulging on Thanksgiving, but being smart the rest of November, you're probably going to be okay as far as your weight. One day is not going to make a huge difference. And finally, what's a holiday without giving? Many of the holidays do include the tradition of gift giving. So why not ask for and give away gifts that keep on giving throughout the year? Any gift related to helping you or a loved one improve your health is the best thing that you could give. And here's just a few ideas of some of the things you could do for yourself or someone else, or if any of you guys have ideas for some other ones that aren't up here, feel free to share them in the chat box and maybe some of us can help each other out. But, in the past, like the healthy meal subscriptions, so these are very popular. One of my aunts was struggling with her weight and she asked me she wanted a healthy gift that Christmas, and so I got her a healthy meal subscription for a year, and she was so grateful, and it was probably one of the best gifts she had ever received. So really doing simple things like that can go a long way, and a lot of times are more meaningful than a gift card or a pair of clothes, which of course we need those things too, but I think if you're doing something that truly helps somebody's health, or even if you give a gift yourself, it's the gift that keeps on giving, just like the title says. So with that, we have come to this last strategy to help you maintain your weight this holiday season. And I hope some or all of these tips have enlightened you guys and will help you live better not only today, but also throughout next year. And I just want to give another plug again for the webinar that we're having next month on ditching diets. So our diets that we should ditch, so a lot of the fad diets that are out there, and then how to really make better resolutions and live better throughout the year. And with that, do any of you guys have any questions?
Please just go ahead and chat in your questions, and remember that we will be sending you a very short evaluation a little bit later today. and we really do appreciate you filling it out. It's very helpful.
I got through that a little bit quicker than I thought I would, so
Better short than long.
That's true. So definitely take questions if any of you guys have them, or comments. Happy to see those too. I wasn't able to read the entire chat, but I did see several people commenting, great idea, so there must be some other good ideas people are sharing, so be sure to check the chat box before you leave as well.
All right, we'll just give it another minute or two to see if there are any questions. And if you just remember, got just the last couple moments, if you want to download the upcoming webinars and also the PDF for today's webinar. And we hope y'all will have healthier habits through the years, through the holidays, and through the coming year. And as Jamila mentioned, please join us in December for our next webinar. Okay, I don't see any more
no questions.
really.
Well, thank you guys for your comments. A lot of people said thank you, so I appreciate that.
And hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow for long-term care.